Hi there, welcome to Alpine Bravo. My name's Brendan. This is my channel for all things Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this tutorial, we'll be taking a quick look at how to fly a circuit in the Dare Kodiak 100 by SimWorks Studio. This covers quite a bit of ground that have been covered in the takeoff and landing tutorials, but circuits, of course, brings it all together into quite an intense process. And it's a great way to hone and refine your takeoff and particularly landing skills. We'll be using the Belfast City airport, that's Echo Golf Alpha Charlie, based in Northern Ireland in the UK, because I've got some nice scenery for it, and it's also got lots of great landmarks, which really helps with flying the traffic pattern. Okay, so next we'll hop in the cockpit. I'll get the aircraft started and lined up on the runway, and see you there. Here we are lined up on runway 4 at Belfast City. We have plenty of runway, and we're not going to be focusing on things like performance because we've covered those in other tutorials. But just to say, the aircraft setup, the bypass is in normal mode. We're at sea level, standard weather, and we'll be flying a left-hand traffic pattern for reasons that will become clear when I'm flying it, because it gives some really good views of the city and some good landmarks. Now, just in general terms of a traffic pattern, consistency is what you want to try and aim for, so get in the habit of setting some target numbers and flying to them. So the plan is, I'll rotate, at this weight I could rotate at 55, but I'll rotate at 60 knots, and I'll always rotate at 60 knots as I'm flying the circuits. We'll climb runway heading until we reach 500 feet above ground level, and I'll set the altimeter to QFE, so that means when I'm on the ground the altimeter will read 0 feet, or I've got it as close as I can. So once we get to 500 AGL, I'll turn left onto the crosswind, which is 310 degrees, and we'll carry on climbing in the turn up to our pattern altitude of 1,000 feet. Then we'll turn to the downwind, which will be on a course of 220, fly down the wind, try and target 90 knots in the downwind. That can be tricky, and one way to do that is to go to flaps 35. We'll be taking off flaps 20 as per normal, and then once, certainly by the time we're abeam the threshold of runway 04, we want to start to think about descending, managing our power in the descent, turning to base once the threshold's about 45 degrees sort of aft of the wing, onto a base leg of 130 degrees, and then turn into final, sort of target 500 feet AGL for base and turn into final. And now the one thing, as I'm sure you know, is that power management is really critical in the Kodiak. Before we get going, I'll also bring up the input viewer so we can see what I'm doing with my rudder pedals, ailerons, etc. Okay, with all that covered, we'll get on with our first circuit, and we'll fly a number and see how we get on. We'll try it some with the clear weather preset, and then we'll switch to live weather and see what that looks like with the turbulence. So I'll also use my head tracking as well. Now, head tracking is worth its weight in gold when you're flying circuits. It's really something that starts to really pay off. So I'm just going to release the parking brake. I've got the toe brakes on. I'm going to release them. I'll go for rolling takeoff. We could set our takeoff torque would be 1740. We're not going to go as high as that. We'll go for about 1400. Airspeed's live. 40 knots. There's 60 rotate. Let it fly off. We can climb out at 73. I didn't set the flight director, because I find that can get in the way, but we're just going to watch our, try and climb out around about 75 knots. 73 is best for obstacle clearance, and that's what you use in a short field. And we're coming up on 500 feet AGL. It's 580, there we go. It's actually 600, just gonna carry on climbing in the turn. Just overshot a little bit. Coming up on 1,000, so we'll start to level out. And the speed will immediately start to shoot up, so don't want to do that. And I'm going to turn now to 220. Just want some, got these cranes on my left. I'm also going to go flaps 35 now, which I can do as long as below 108 knots. That will help stop the speed creeping up, which it can do very easily. And when you're rolling out, there's 220, about 20 degrees before your target course. That's when you should start the rollout, because it's very easy to overshoot otherwise. It's 87 knots, so we want to target 90 for the downwind. And we're a little high. So in terms of landing configuration, we're at flaps 35, and we're in high idle. Not bothering, by the way, with the auxiliary fuel pump, because it just creates more cockpit noise, and it's not really necessary. So there we are, beam the runway. I'm going to pull the power back and start a shallow descent. We've lost our heading a little bit, drawn towards that spire in front of me, but now there's the Titanic Museum, so I know that that's a good landmark. And it's 130 for base. Try and trim it out as well. I want to slow, bring the power back. There's a lot going on when you're flying 500. It's 500. Don't really want to go too much lower, so I'll pull it out a little bit. Bring the power back up. 77 knots. That's pretty good. And I'll start rolling onto the runway now. This stadium here, football pitch, not sure what it is, provides a very good landmark. Probably started to turn a little bit too soon. Okay, and just 1,000. A little high according to the pappies. Now as I come to the threshold, I'm pulling the power back, but pulling the nose up. Looking at the angle of attack indicator as well. There we go, there's 4 green crosses, just hold that. There we are. The flaps can go up 1 notch. Apply takeoff power. And we're at 65 knots already. Just gentle rotation.
Don't sink. Don't
now
sink.
One thing you might
Don't
want to do
sink.
is
don't sink. Don't
inhibit the
sink.
TOS.
Don't sink.
And you do that with this button here. I've got it bound to a switch, which is what I flicked, but otherwise you'll keep on getting your don't sink message. So when you're doing circuits, good idea to inhibit the TOS. Right, there's 500 feet coming up. Climb in the turn, targeting 310 degrees. There's 340, we start rollout. Okay, not too bad. There are cranes. Try and note where you are in relation to these. There's 1,000 feet, so we'll start to level out and turn. So I'm using the visual references, ground references, to get myself aligned. I've actually crept up to 1,100 feet, so I'm going to pull back on the power. See so I'm up at 110 knots. Okay, there's 1,000 feet, so I'll just pull up a bit and get myself below 108 knots. Go flaps 35. So landing check. We're in high idle. Fuel. Let's watch the speed. And we're turning to base. Good bit slower on this one. We're down at 74 knots. So with the Kodiak, as I say, it's all about power management. So you want to fly with one hand on the stick or the yoke and the other hand on your power lever, however you control the power. Okay, there's the Titanic Museum, so we will turn to base, targeting 130. Start to roll out now. Okay, 132, there's our football stadium. I think we're a little high, so I'm going to pull back on the power. Keep trimming as well throughout. And of course, when you're turning, you can see I'm using the rudder to coordinate the turn as best I can. Did I turn a bit too soon again there? So 70 knots, now that's getting close to as slow as you want to get on the approach in the Kodiak. Pilot operating handbook says 80 to 85 knots, you obviously land slower than that. Showing high on the PAPI. Now we can start to look at our angle of attack indicator. Flare, gently pulling back the power at the same time. Get that nose up. And that's about as good a landing as you can hope for in the Kodiak. Okay, I'll just bring it to a stop there and I'll take it back and line it up and try with some live weather and see how that is. Well, here we are back at runway 4. Now we have live weather, which isn't quite so nice. We've got wind 360 and it's gusting between, I would say, well, there's 9 knots, but I've seen it go up to 16 knots, so it is pretty gusty, 17 degrees. So we definitely have, as you can see, a bit of a crosswind, and that's going to make it a little bit more interesting. So for crosswinds, obviously that affects your takeoff and landing technique. You're going to be using rudder and aileron to control the aircraft, but also it will affect how you fly your circuit. You're going to have to allow for wind drift in what courses you fly. So it's coming slightly from the left. So when I'm flying the downwind, I'm going to have to maybe fly 225 or 230 to maintain a track over the ground parallel to the runway. It also, of course, affects your final as well. A stronger headwind, shorter, steeper descent potentially. And same with the climb out as well. But yeah, it'll make it a bit more interesting. The turbulence settings that are available in the assistance options in Microsoft Flight Simulator I have set to realistic, which can be pretty bouncy. Okay, but otherwise everything else is going to be the same except takeoff crosswind from the left. So I'm going to be weather vaning to the left, so that means I need to use right rudder to counteract that, and also left aileron to stop the left wing from lifting. Just take it out of beta. Okay, we're releasing the parking brake. Toe brakes are on, releasing the toe brakes. Smoothly bringing up that takeoff power. Smooth line, just weather vaning. .60 knots. So gonna helping using the synthetic vision on the PFD to try and stay over the runway. And you can see what I mean about it being a shorter climb out. I'm over 500 feet already, but I'm not anywhere close to clearing the end of the runway threshold, as you can see from the MFD. So I'll keep on climbing, and I'll start my turn now that I'm at the runway threshold. Watch your bank angles as well. There's 940 feet, so we can think about leveling out. And this is where using ground visual references as well is much more, rather than just courses. So if you pick two items on your line of sight and keep them lined up, that will keep you on your track. That's us over the cranes, and in fact you can see we drifted quite a lot further down. Wind indicator on the, I'm going to go flaps 35. So the wind indicator on the PFD is very helpful. 90 knots, that's good. We're at about 1050 torque. Aircraft's obviously moving around quite a lot more, but this is okay. Well, we're past the threshold. I'm wanting to pitch up quite a lot, so just trim that out a bit. Okay. There's the Titanic Museum, and I'll give myself a bit of a longer downwind just to give myself a little bit more time to line up. Now we want to target about 80 knots, 85 knots, and we've overshot on base a bit. Now there's our football field there. Gusts. So this is where you have to watch your speed, trim it out, set up a crab angle so the wind is coming from the left, so keep the nose pointing from the left, pointing to the left. And what we'll do is, in fact, tricky, trying to get at 70 knots. I'll get some bouncing as I come over the water.
Stall.
And there's a stall warning, so that would trigger a go around. I managed to come out of that. But we will carry on with the go around. So bring the flaps up to 20. You have takeoff power set. 600 feet. I'm coming up on the threshold, so I'll start my turn. Yeah, it's all well and good flying the Kodiak in clear weather presets, but it gets a lot more interesting in live weather. So I'm going to pull the power back now. There are cranes coming up. Turn to the downwind. It's a slightly longer crosswind that, but then that will help a little bit with the drift. Okay, there's 225. It's the main ferry terminal there. I was there earlier this year. Okay, flaps 35. A little bit low, 800 feet. Again, we're looking out for, there's the Titanic Museum. So that wind was coming quite strongly from the north as well, so for this leg I actually want to aim target something like 120. There's our stadium there. It's a useful landmark. Watching the speed. So we got into a stall warning situation last time, so it's one thing when it is gusty, you want to consider whether you want to go for a full flaps landing, or you might be better off landing on flaps 20. But I would say with the Kodiak it's always better to come in higher on profile. Things get really bad if you get low and slow. So we're pretty fast now, 90 knots. Got plenty of runway, fortunately. Okay. Little bit. So I'm still flying the plane. I've got left aileron down. I'll just bring it to a stop. Okay, so if you practice in clear weather and start to get the feel and the numbers dialed in, it gets a lot easier when you start to have to fly in slightly more challenging real world conditions. These aren't exceptional by any means, these conditions, it's just getting used to it, and also not being afraid to have a go around if it's not too good. That first attempt I definitely was a bit low and slow, and that's the worst kind of situation you can get in with the Kodiak. Anyway, hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next one.